Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that you can get wet but should never feed after midnight. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is on a mission to help people stop believing in Santa Claus, Bianca.
Hello, lovely people.
And joining the rotation with us tonight is your new favorite, Hanna Vaughn, here to talk about the secular and the sexuality of the holiday movie season. Hanna, thanks for jumping in with us again.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be there. Hey, don't forget at 9 p.m. I do have a show with Ethan Michael on the Friendly Neighborhood Atheist channel. And we're going to be talking about infidelity. So if you want to talk about more saucy subjects.
Yeah, happy Christmas.
yeah, saucy Christmas time.
All right. We are so lucky to have Hanna here before she jumps to the next show. So if you love Hanna, you're getting a lot of her tonight. In the meantime, we are going to be discussing Christmas movies and kind of reviewing some of those old favorite rom-coms in addition to a new favorite rom-com, maybe least favorite rom-com, Happiest season. So fair warning, there will be spoilers. So make sure that you're okay talking about these movies with us. If you have opinions on Christmas movies or just have general questions about sex, gender, or relationships, feel free to call the show at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex is a link that you can use to call free from anywhere in the world. So we are here. We want to talk with you. And this is your last chance to talk with us live before the end of the year. So here's your chance.
All right, well, let's jump into it. V, you kind of warned everybody we may be getting into some spoiler territory, but as we're talking about Happiest Season, the new film out on Hulu, I think it's fair to say that if you haven't seen the movie, you're not going to be missing out on anything in this discussion. I don't know that there's anything literally at all within the film that you couldn't have guessed from the credits, from the trailers, and everything that goes with it. So this is a kind of an interesting film for us to be dissecting. It is a very cheesy, very kind of Hallmark Christmas movie, sort of thrown together background popcorn kind of flick, but it asks some interesting questions. There's a lot here. There's an incredible cast list. You've got Kristen Stewart, Mackenzie Davis, Aubrey Plaza, Victor Garber, Mary Sternberger. I mean, even the background characters are people that you kind of like adore and root for. It's all written and directed by Clea Duvall, who I think is something of a queer icon, it may be fair to say. But it's ultimately a very kind of pulpy film, and raises an interesting question because it's being billed as like the queer holiday movie. And shouldn't queer folks also be able to have kind of silly, stupid, campy pulp movies? But it's also a movie that's starting out going over the question of coming out. It's kind of that classic queer story that we've heard over and over again. So there's a lot to dive into. V, what was your take on this movie?
That's a great overview. Thank you for that info, Christy. And I honestly, if you just like looking at pretty people, this is a good movie to watch. It's difficult to not love the dynamic between Kristen Stewart and Aubrey Plaza. You're kind of rooting for them the whole time.
Team Aubrey.
Aubrey for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I have conflicting feelings about this movie. I've seen it twice this year. The first time fresh without any kind of spoilers, without any kind of reading of reviews. And then I read a bunch of other people's takes and watched it again to kind of get a second opinion. And there's a lot to unpack here, actually. So yay, gay holiday rom-com, right?
Sure,
that's
right?
awesome. About time.
We're just breaking down barriers left and right?
Well, it's tapping on them and kind of maybe wiggling them a little bit. I don't know if breaking them down is the best way to phrase it, just because it is very, there's still a lot going on that needs to be unpacked, right? It's a good first step for sure. And it's something we need. And if you enjoyed it, that's awesome. If you felt seen by it, great. It's gay. I don't know if I'd call it queer, if that makes any sense. Like, it's still very, they try and be transgressive about it. And Daniel Levy's character, of course, is like, yeah, smash the patriarchy. That's so heteronormative. But at the same time, it is very centered around monogamy, and you could swap the characters with a cis het straight couple, and not much about the dynamic would change at all. And maybe it's too much to ask for a movie that queers things a little bit more, and maybe we'll get that at some point. But as far as this movie goes, it's a decent step in the right direction, I'd say.
Sure. Hanna, what was your take on this soon-to-be Christmas classic, Happiest Season?
This is really embarrassing, but am I muted?
Nope, we can hear you.
We're hearing you.
Good. So in case anyone didn't know, I'm like a super new to podcasting and streaming. So I forgot which light meant mute and which didn't. Okay, we're good. So I watched it with V last night. And I was surprised how much I liked it. I was not surprised how much I hated it. It wasn't necessarily groundbreaking. It was like, yay, we're acknowledging gay people. And I'm like, okay, but if you want to normalize it, this isn't really how you do it. It would be nice to see a gay movie that's just like, they're gay and also have a story. But the whole thing was kind of just centered around like, they're gay, oh no, and what do we do? There was a lot of cool stuff they touched on. Spoiler alert, Kristen Stewart's parents are dead, and that's why she can't go home for Christmas. And that kind of bummed me out in the beginning, because I thought they were cheaping out on like, that's a really good opportunity to kind of show that a lot of gay people can't go home for Christmas because they didn't have a good coming out and they're not accepted. But then it is later acknowledged with the character John saying, that's great that, your parents did accept you before they died, but I haven't spoken to my father in 13 years. So I'm like, that's great that they acknowledge that, because that's the reality for a lot of people.
Right. Isn't it strange that the only accepting parents are also dead? Like, yay, there were accepting parents. Also, they're dead now.
Yeah, it's like the Disney parents. Like, they either have to be evil and brooding or dead.
We're dead.
Like, to be virtuous means that you don't exist. Yeah.
And something V kept just yelling with me last night was, there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries between the family. There's no boundaries with the girlfriends. So many boundaries are completely just stepped on and disrespected, and not even... I was flabbergasted. There's so many people that I would, if I were in this person's shoes, I'd be like, wow, I'd never talk to that person again.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting.
It might be an interesting thing to talk about in terms of maybe if they had done a better job of talking about how there aren't very many, there isn't that respect of boundaries and consent and communication in a lot of what we consider to be mainstream society. Like, a lot of things are taken for granted and not talked about, and that can cause a lot of, crossing over of boundaries that should be, respected. But it wasn't juxtaposed against anything, right? It wasn't like, here is what mainstream society struggles with, and here is what maybe a more, alternative, I guess, a queer lifestyle might promote in terms of better communication or, better boundaries or understanding what you need and what you need from your partner. It would have been interesting to see that explored a little bit. But it wasn't. Like, nobody had boundaries. Like, there was no communication, and it was just a train wreck.
It was kind of the typical thing that a lot of rom-coms rely on, which is where, they aren't talking, so there's a problem that could be easily solved if they just spoke. I tweeted that the other day, and I'm like, yes, there would be no rom-coms if people just communicated.
Yeah, V, I appreciate what you said about this being like a quote gay movie, but one that is not at all queer. Like the aesthetic, the vibe, the storytelling, the values in this movie are not at all queer. I mean, this is kind of being pitched in a lot of ways as a gay movie, and yet they somehow still manage to have the gay best friend like archetype, stereotypical character. I mean, it does feel really kind of ham-fisted in that way. And I know that there's been a lot of criticism about how this is a coming out story. This is the being forced into the closet story that queer film is just so tired of seeing again and again. And some of the pushback about that has been like, well, this is Clea Duvall's like actual true story. This is based on her life in a lot of ways. I mean, fictionalized, of course. I don't know to what extent any of this is real, but it is drawing from her own experiences. But ultimately, it left me feeling like there's nothing like truly queer about this movie. And that's why it's so baffling to see it populated by so many people whose work I admire and who I do feel have pushed the envelope in a lot of ways. How did it feel seeing some of these characters brought to life, these very thin characters drawn out by people that you maybe expect a lot more from?
Yeah, I think it's spot on.
Go ahead.
It's spot on. Sorry about that. I think there's a little bit of a lag, Hannah, and so we might talk over each other just a tad.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. It was basically the message was gay people can be in toxically monogamous relationships too.
Yeah, that's the message here. We can screw up just like the straights.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, for me, the character actors made it, right? Daniel Levy made it. Kristen Stewart, Aubrey Plaza, these people gave life to characters that otherwise would be extremely thin. Personally, I'm sad that Alison Brie didn't get a beefier role as Sloane, because I'm rewatching Glow right now, and she is phenomenal. But yeah, I think that the cast saved it from what it would be otherwise. Hannah, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I feel like I was very blinded for my just intense adoration for Kristen Stewart and Aubrey Plaza and other characters. I'm like, I just love them so much. But it was kind of bad. I was surprised how much I did laugh, though. It was cute. You know, it wasn't boring. Well, it got boring.
Yeah, I mean, assuming you have your phone in your hand and you're like on Twitter while you're watching it, it was sufficiently not boring. And I think that's the kind of the pulpiness that they're angling for. But did they earn it, Hannah?
I was with V eating cookies and drinking wine. So like I had a great time and we were like yelling about it the whole time because, okay, you said this was based on someone's actual coming out story, which I'm really bad with actor names. What's the character?
Yeah, so Mackenzie Davis's character, the daughter in the story, who is closeted by the pressures of her family, is something of a stand-in for Clea Duvall, who has been, I think, something of a queer icon at least since But I'm a Cheerleader, and films like the Faculty and The Craft and these different things. I think she gets that kind of draw. But for me, it almost raises a question. I don't mean to be entitled about these creators, but I do wonder when these people that we kind of look for, like Kristen Stewart in particular, something of a mover and shaker in Hollywood, Clea Duvall perhaps in a behind the scenes kind of way, I almost feel a sense of betrayal that this is sort of what they chose to put forth. And I recognize that there are pressures that they're working within and they were able to get this out there and that feels good. But I don't know. I feel really conflicted. And I guess I wonder if either of y'all have that same sense of betrayal or excitement. I mean, maybe we should be grateful for this.
That it exists, but I also feel like it's a gay movie for straight people. I mean, can we talk about
for straight people?
Yeah.
Straight gazy.
Yeah. So was the writer outed by her sister in real life? Is that sister dead to her? Because she should be. Can we talk about how that is not normal and not acceptable in any way and how it was fine after that?
Yeah, this does normalize.
Fine. That should, if someone outs you, they better get on their hands and knees and beg for forgiveness, because that is unacceptable. I was freaking out about that. I'm like, wait, they're just fine now? She outed her to her parents and to like the public at a Christmas party. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately, I guess I'm sorry, V, you had one more thought before we wrap up on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of maybe throw in there that I would be interested to see what the first draft of this script looks like, right? Like, I am sure, having been an editor, right, having worked for publishers that had certain standards, right, what exactly this first script entailed. Maybe it was something that was a lot more representative of a queer experience. And maybe that's what brought some of these actors on board, you know, sold them on it. And then, I mean, who knows what gets lost on the cutting floor, right? Sure. So I think what we're seeing is probably something that Clea Duvall, Kristen Stewart, probably some of these people would agree. Like, this was whitewashed, essentially. This was probably not completely accurate to the vision that was entailed.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And yeah, there's room to be upset if you want to be upset. I think there is room to see this as progress, even if that's sort of like, you know, tumbling down a hill more than it is like breaking any boundaries. But at the end of the day, if you are home for the holidays, if you are in the kitchen, you are maybe peeling potatoes and spending time with your family, and you're looking for something silly and stupid and pulpy to put on in the background, is this furthering the dialogue? Is this something that you can put on for your maybe conservative leaning parents to try to push the envelope a little bit, or is it better skipped?
Yeah, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that sound kind of answers the question a little bit. I mean, I want to hear your actual answers, but that sound says a lot, doesn't it?
That noise I made kind of is how I felt about the movie.
Sure.
Like, okay, cool. They're gay, and like, that's awesome. But like, you could have done so much more. You really could.
Yeah.
But I mean, it upset a lot of people, and that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I get. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I want to normalize it, but like, I don't know. That's where I stand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is a very, very specific type of person that this was made for, and these are for the moderate to, you know, somewhat like 90s liberal groups that are like, oh, I think, like, I'm colorblind and love is love, and like the ones who hang those like Black Lives Matter posters in their like $3 million houses and think like they're activists for it. Like, that's the type of person that this is targeting, which, I mean, cool. I mean, everyone deserves to get movies that target them, but also it doesn't really do much for me.
Yeah, well, that's fair to say. I definitely walked out of it thinking like, okay, if you had told me that Mackenzie Davis or that Kristen Stewart was going to be in a love triangle with Mackenzie Davis and Aubrey Plaza, I would have just sight unseen, let's, you know, kickstart that movie, like we'll go fund me it, like whatever we need to do to get this made. And that was certainly not the experience of this film. But I do think that if I found myself, you know, cooking and just wanting some fluff in the background, that I could maybe see myself returning to it next year. I don't know. I'd love to hope for better.
Yeah, I'd watch it again for the eye candy, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to remind folks that we are taking calls. We're at 512-991-9242, and we'd love to hear your take on this movie or whatever else you maybe have in rotation, your Christmas movies, your Christmas music, whatever else is on your mind. We'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, V, I know that you are like crazy level excited to break down and give us your very hot takes on a 20-year-old Christmas film. let's jump into it. What do you got for us, V?
Absolutely. Talking about watching something just for the eye candy. Let's talk a little bit about Love Actually, or for this episode, maybe we'll call it Love Actually Isn't That Complicated If You Communicate.
Right.
Which should have been the title, honestly. And it follows eight or nine different couples. In case you haven't seen it, Hannah, calling you out on air.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Follows about 8 couples who are in various kinds of relationships, and it talks about their struggles over the 5-week period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or Christmas and New Year's. And it basically just follows these 8 couples. And it's very straight. It's very white. It's very heteronormative, very much focused on monogamy. So while there is variance, there isn't very much. Like, basically, it's how many different ways can we tell a story about 2 cis het white people, or white for the most part, living in London, very, Western society type thing. So I do want to kind of treat some of these couples. I picked 5 of them, and I would love to treat them and kind of like talk as a group, like if they called into the show, like with that particular story plot line, like what would we want to talk about with them? What would be the thing that would make the movie not possible because they would just live happily ever after? And the first one that I want to talk about is David and Natalie, who are played by Hugh Grant and Martine McCutcheon. And David's character is the prime minister, newly elected, and Martine is his one of the staff at his mansion, at his manor. And their main struggles is that a power dynamic exists that is very confusing and taboo. And also, at some point, Martine, at the time, a very, very over-the-top stereotype of, oh God, I'm forgetting her name. Bill Clinton.
Monica Lewinsky is sort of the
right.
comparison. Yeah, you've got that Billy Bob Thornton stand-in for George W. Bush because it was 2001. Now you're caught up if you haven't seen it.
And she basically gets sexually harassed by the president of the United States. Gasp, a president sexually harassing people, and gets fired as a result, or moved to another location because Hugh Grant feels betrayed by her that she would allow herself to be sexually harassed by the most powerful person in the world, right? And so Christy, Hannah, if Natalie called in and was like, hey, I'm in love with my boss, he's the prime minister, and I was sexually harassed by the president of the United States, and now I lost my job, how do I tell him I love him? What would you say?
Let me get one thing straight. Did the prime minister shame her?
Yeah, he was basically, this is
okay.
You
and
should
this
leave.
very kind of cute, like, we're not going to actually put a label on it, we're going to distance ourselves from it kind of way, Yeah, it's weak sauce.
Yeah, he's a weak little boy. Don't waste your time.
I think that's the answer, right?
Ew. So, okay, I did watch half of the movie, and I got up to the part where I know that the prime minister is in love with Natalie and that she smooched on the American president. But he shames her. Like, that's weird. I'm sorry. He's not a man. He's not a grown man. He's a child. That is very immature, and it's weird. And he needs to go to therapy and figure out why he's victim blaming. Mic drop.
Yeah, I have to reach for Dan Savage's DTMFA. Like, there's no way they should be in a relationship. She needs to just dump the motherfucker already. There's absolutely no value in pursuing that. And I know it's a romantic comedy and it's a silly movie, but it does, I don't know, if anything, it maybe warms my heart to 20 years later recognize that I don't think that storyline would be told that way anymore. I don't think post Me Too that we would be as comfortable or as cavalier maybe about depicting things that way. Maybe that's wishful thinking.
No, I
that's
think you're
wild.
right. Yeah, and that plus there are so many like there's a lot of fat phobia too. Like she is not
Sure,
a
yeah.
stick, and everyone's like making fun of her weight and like calling her names. It's like, what is happening?
We just showed the picture. She's very conventionally attractive. I mean, I don't think I'm outing myself by saying she's very pretty.
She is she's
That's
one of the prettiest
wild.
people in the show, as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, Colin Firth clearly, but Martine McCutcheon after that. All right, so let's talk about the next one, and this is probably the one that most people have that heartache around, and that's Karen and Harry, played by Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman, who, by the way, are like really good friends in real life. R.I.P. Alan. So in this couple, Harry is the boss of this company, and his secretary is coming onto him hard. Like she is just pulling out all the stops, trying to get him interested, and he's kind of playing along. And Karen is feeling kind of threatened by that. And at a Christmas party, they kind of get closer, Harry and this secretary. And then he ends up buying his secretary a very expensive present and kind of skimping out on getting his wife anything. He gets her a Joni Mitchell CD, which is
not nothing.
But at the same time, like, oh my goodness, that scene with Both Sides Now and her just like trying not to cry every single time gets me. But this is kind of highlights what I consider not only the whole cheating thing, but that toxic monogamy and that concept of we can't talk about this, right? Like the idea that you would be attracted to someone else is unthinkable and in itself a betrayal. And that then leads to the idea that, of course, this is going to happen clandestinely because the ability to have that conversation isn't even on the table. So Christy, Hanna, if Karen calls in and says, hey, my husband is, I think, attracted to his secretary and I don't know what to do about it, what do we tell Karen?
I mean, I don't want to say anything that is going to interrupt the beautiful speech that Emma Thompson gives so wonderfully when she confronts her husband. That is perhaps one of the greatest scenes in Christmas cinema, if I can, pretend to be doing a movie podcast for a minute. But in terms of her as a real life person, yeah, I think if you break the film down a little bit, he gave a gift that was probably inappropriate and pushed on a boundary in response to a secretary that was aggressively pushing against the kind of established norms. And I don't know that you can really damn him for that. I know that he apologizes. I know that he breaks his wife's heart. And the film is structured so that you really do feel for her. And it's clear that this is a marriage that has been on not life support, but that has been cold and distant for a long time now. And I just can't help but feel like there's something worth going back for there, that there is value in that relationship. And to see everybody so quick to throw in the towel because of something that didn't even lead to any sexual contact, any expressions of love or anything else. It just kind of reminds me how our society idolizes monogamy and never even sees it as a option or as a choice, but as a god to be worshipped. And that kind of deification and fetishization really doesn't sit right with me.
No, yeah, that's okay. So I didn't realize it played out that way, but since I saw the flirting, I was wondering.
Yeah, we spoiled it for you, huh?
Fantastic. Do they ever hook up? It sounds like they don't.
They never.
But he buys her a weird.
The assumption is that he buys her a necklace and that's the most that you know about. The question mark there is essentially what she asks is, was it just a necklace? Was it a necklace and sex? Or worse, could it have been a necklace and love? And he doesn't necessarily answer. He just says, I've been a fool. How dare I? I'm sorry. But yeah, it's kind of left up in the air.
No, this is amazing because I'm going to get personal for a second. I'm in a monogamous relationship, but having just blatant, just very, very honest human conversations with your partner and accepting the fact that you are human and you can be attracted to other people. And that is one of the most freeing conversations and one of the most freeing things you can do for yourself and your partner is just accept them as a human who has feelings and hormones, and attraction will happen, and pretending that it doesn't just will hurt the entire relationship and everyone in it. So I don't know. I need to watch this goddamn movie. But that's my take on, if the wife called in, it happens, man.
And I do want to make sure that we're also I watched this movie. I showed it to Eric. The funniest part of the entire movie was watching him freak out every time a new actor showed up, because it really is just this smorgasbord of faces and names that you know. I didn't tell him who was in it, so I just put it on, and he was like, wait, what? But we were talking about this. And the one thing I do want to stress is the secretary is absolutely not doing this in an ethical way, right? She knows it's a monogamous relationship. She knows that being with her would be considered cheating. This is not, hey, I know you guys are open. I'm interested in pursuing something. It is actually not an ethical way to go about it. So this is by no means saying that her actions are okay, but it does just frame the whole situation in a way that, makes you think, okay, well, if there were other ways to approach this, would the relationship have survived?
I agree.
Yeah, I think
that was. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. Please finish.
No, I got to the part where she was very clearly flirting with him, and then I realized, oh, he has a wife. That's incredibly inappropriate. Also, don't flirt with your boss. That's freaking weird. There's so much of this power dynamic going on in this movie that should just. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it's just a mess,
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, well, just to say, I don't want to linger too much on one facet of this complicated movie in this bizarre but really fun episode that y'all are building with me here. But there is this moment, this quiet moment that I've always sort of adored, that my partner actually called out way back when we first saw this film together some 10 or 15 years ago, where Emma Thompson's character comments on the secretary. She says something along the lines of, Nina's very pretty. And Alan Rickman's character responds with something like, oh, I hadn't noticed. And all she says in response is, careful there, and just leaves it at that. And I work to help couples communicate for a living. So, I definitely want to see more active and intentional conversation the way that you're describing, V. But I guess, having a kind of quiet moment out loud in front of an audience with you good people now, where I recognize sort of that journey in myself, because I used to find that careful, subtle comment to be a really beautiful thing about marriage. This idea that you can say so much with such a subtlety. And now that I find myself on this side of a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more perhaps enlightenment, or certainly at least training on communication and these other pieces, I find it to be incredibly insufficient. And I think that that's worth highlighting here, that there's no, like you said, V, there's nothing wrong with having a crush. but not being able to talk about it with your partner, not being able to be honest about it with your partner. I'm not talking about open marriages or pursuing these crushes or anything along those lines, so much as just the right or the ability, the opportunity to simply acknowledge that you have a feeling. That feels like an important part of a
Absolutely.
partnership.
Gosh, that's beautifully said. You know,
It's actually-
it would be wonderful. I know we don't want to dwell on this too much, but there's so much going on in this. It's just, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to go to your partner and say, there's someone flirting with me at work and I like it, and not be judged for that? It would be amazing. But that, people feel betrayed by people having emotions.
Yeah.
It's sad. I don't judge them, because I understand that. I've been in that position where you looked at another person and I feel heartbroken by that. I'm not the only person for you, but that's reality. And if you talk about it, you can avoid a lot.
Yeah, V, when you labeled this relationship as suffering from cheating and toxic monogamy, part of me was like, well, I don't know if the monogamy here is toxic. Like, cheating is a real problem. But as we break it down, you've won me over. I completely agree with your point of view. I think this is maybe an important thing for people to notice in their own marriages, things for people to be aware of. I know it can feel like, because we do this kind of show, that we're trying to like vampirize everybody into turning poly, which is just not the case. Monogamy is valid and beautiful, but when it is rigid and comes with this sort of like deified ideas around it, it becomes really toxic.
Exactly. Yay! I made a point and Christy agreed with me. That's going on the highlight list of 2020.
Put it on the whiteboard.
Oh my gosh. All right. So let's speed through these last ones, because I don't want to take up too much of this time. But let's talk quickly about Mark and Juliet, played by Andrew Lincoln of Walking Dead fame now, and Keira Knightley, who is only 17 in this show. Hanna
is 13. She's way younger. He's way older.
It's so weird. But for those of you who haven't seen this movie, Keira Knightley is married, and her husband's best friend, Mark, Andrew Lincoln here, is in love with her. And he didn't tell her until she found a video that he had taken of their wedding that was just basically all close-up, glowy images of her face. And so that was concerning. And she kind of ran away and he ran away, and they didn't address it until, I believe, Christmas Eve. He shows up at the door. And this is where that meme comes from, of the dude holding
the
the
very
sign.
famous.
Right. And he just basically says on these signs that, I know that this is not something you're into, but I'm in love with you and I will always be in love with you. And that's all I need to tell you that. Goodbye. And he walks away. She runs out. She gives him a kiss and then she leaves. And that's pretty much the end of that storyline. That's where it's left. And I'm always so conflicted about this particular one. There are a lot where I have a real good grasp of how I feel about the situation. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about this one. And I'm curious what you guys think. Who's the bad guy, or is there a bad guy, or is someone wrong here? And if so, who? Are they both out of line? Like, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think it's kind of a beautiful relationship, and I'm already anticipating the hate mail, and I'm okay with it. We can talk it through. Please feel free to share your feelings. This is a safe space.
Call in. Tell Christy how wrong.
Call in. Tell me off. But I honestly do. I think that it is beautiful. I think that we're talking about two adult human people that are able to acknowledge that they had an emotion. There's nothing that you need to apologize for when it comes to your emotions. You owe it to other people to take responsibility and ownership for your actions. And that's the end of the list. That's it. The things that you do, the things that you say, you're responsible to one another for. But the things that you feel, your hopes, your dreams, your thoughts, your fears, your nightmares, everything else, I think that that's okay. And I think that acknowledging these emotions out loud is okay. Now, I know that people will like to dissect that video and talk about how over the top it is. And, that's not unfair. I kind of see that maybe as more like movie magic. I like to dissect it a little bit and say that, maybe in real life it wouldn't be so glaring that the focus of his footage was so thoroughly on her. But he was filming a wedding. He was filming the bride. He was filming his crush, and he was doing what he was supposed to do. And then perhaps went back later and realized that, some of his own vision was coming through the camera in that way. I personally think that this is a beautiful story. And a key moment is when he walks away and acknowledges that
Right,
it's
that
enough
line
now.
gets me
Like, this
every
is, I
time.
have expressed
Yeah.
these feelings. Yeah, I've expressed these feelings. I have shared this beautiful moment with another human being. And that's as far as I'm going to take it. That's all I need to do with it. And no judgment. I don't see any flaws in that.
Oh, I've been spoiled. So he's not gay. I thought he was in love with the husband, and I know they paint it that way for the first half of the movie.
No.
My mind's full of, he's in love with her. I didn't realize. Is she also in love
Right?
with him though?
No, I don't think
I don't
so.
think she loves him. I think she
She acknowledged.
appreciates the crush.
Yeah.
Oh,
Has affection for.
I don't have anything to add. That's beautiful.
I'm wondering though, you guys, what do you think about not bringing the husband/best friend into it? Because that's the only other question for me is they were totally within their rights to feel how they're feeling. The only issue for me is the fact that they clearly have this very poignant thing that they aren't sharing with somebody who I would imagine would want to know because they're invested as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the dynamics of that relationship. There's nothing to say that after the cameras are rolling that Keira Knightley doesn't go and discuss all of this with, I think, Cheadle Ejiofor? I could be wrong on that. Somebody look it up for me.
No, you're correct. That is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, everybody in this movie is talented. Everybody in this movie either was somebody or turned into somebody afterwards. But yeah, I don't know that you owe it to your partner to have that 100% transparency. Again, I might be drawing some hate mail and bring it on. But while I don't advocate for like secrets and lying and sneaking around, we all know that that's antithetical to the communication that builds a healthy relationship. I also want to acknowledge that you have the right to your own secrets. You have the right to your own privacy and to your own relationships. And yeah, if this continued to like balloon and grow and started to take up more and more headspace and become problematic in that way, then yeah, maybe you do owe it to your partner to acknowledge that there's something there. But I don't know that a fleeting moment is something that you necessarily are obligated to disclose.
I was almost going to
that
disagree
fair?
with you until you said fleeting moment. It's not going to grow. I mean, it also depends on like, is this guy going to go on and be the best friend of this guy forever? And they're never going to know. But I mean, honestly, I feel so conflicted. I didn't have time to digest this movie because I haven't seen it. It's unraveling before me through this, which is wonderful. But if it was just a fleeting moment, I'd say no. I don't think anything's been threatened. I don't think anything's been, if he's going to be like, that was enough for me, I'm done. I'm not trying to steal your wife. It's done. I acknowledge my feelings and it's done. I think two people can share a moment and just move on. What good is it going to do the husband?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the question. I don't know. I don't think that radical honesty is necessarily a healthy policy. I think that all human beings operate, if we want to put a number on it, somewhere between like 60 and 90%. And I think that that's healthy and that's just and that's right. So there is a valid question here of what is the value of disclosing this or of sharing this. And, I like to imagine that there is some moment 10 years on where they are all having a conversation with each other, and who knows what that looks like. But, we just get to see this short vignette within the structure of the film. And I just appreciate the two of y'all kind of dissecting this and breaking it down for me. The fact that, almost 20 years later, we still have like such strong feelings about this, to me, just says that the filmmakers did their job, right?
Oh yeah, no, this is a very heteronormative movie, but I do love it. And I know we have some callers that we need to get to. I do want to touch on one more, and that's Daniel and Sam, played by Liam Neeson and Thomas Brody Sangster. And okay, so like they clearly aren't a couple, it's a father and son. And they are the best, I think, people in this show, because they are communicative. They understand boundaries. Like his son will shut the door and his dad will be like, okay, I don't go in there. I'm respecting his space. I'm going to let him come to me and tell me what's wrong. It turns out he's in love with a girl from his school, but he doesn't say that right away. And so Liam Neeson's character, Daniel, goes, how does she or he feel about you? Like he's open to the idea that the kid might be gay and isn't judgmental. And then he like
in
walks
2001.
In 2001, and he walks his son through this process of being in love, and he takes it seriously. Like at first he makes a joke about it, and his son's like, this is serious, Dad, like I'm in pain. And then boom, like serious, I'm going to help you through this. We're going to talk about communicating with her, telling her how you feel. And I don't know, I honestly think this relationship best produces like a good view of what love could look like.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to jump in as someone who works with children and has been for a very long time. I love the way he acknowledges his feelings. I love that he doesn't minimize it. You know, he goes, oh, I thought it was going to be something worse when he tells us that he's in love. And he's like, worse than the agony of being in love. And he goes, no, you're right. Like you put it perfectly. Like their communication makes them the best dynamic in this movie. And because he acknowledges his feelings and he makes them real, he doesn't talk to him like he's a child, because what he's feeling is real. And I love that. You have to do that with children. I mean, then again, I think he was 13 in this movie, but he looks 8. I don't know. I don't know what he's supposed to be.
Yeah, that relationship is really beautiful, and I love the way that it's acted. I love the way that it's portrayed, and I always, as a kid, felt very like frustrated when my parents would say like, "Well, it may just be puppy love." But, you know, the rest of that expression is it may just be puppy love, but it's love for the puppy. You know, recognizing that children have like rich, complex inner lives that may seem, you know, kind of silly to us from the outside, but from the inside are just as valid, just as powerful, and perhaps oftentimes more so. And taking that seriously, I think, is just really great modeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
V, thank you for kind of bringing this like retread back to our attention and making sure, if nothing else, if we accomplish nothing else tonight, that Hanna is aware of the plot, which feels just important to me as we move forward.
There's so much going on. There's so many damn people in that movie.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to gush about this movie. It's a guilty pleasure, and I love talking about it from a perspective of how it could be better if it was filmed in 2020 as opposed to 2001, but also focused on healthy communication and respecting each other's boundaries.
Mm-hmm.